Okay, I think we are online, right? So welcome everyone. So this is a special kind of session we are trying to establish at the API Force community. So it's we are calling it Dev Shooting, which is majorly for any kind of dev topics and a solution. One of us three have explored and we want to share with the community. So the format is like, one is going to present a solution and the other two are not really familiar about the solution, and they will then ask questions, and this should basically support you to understand the solution in a more better way. So we have on the call, myself is Amir Khan. I have together with me the other two guys. Maybe you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, then I will start. My name is Michael Bosniak. I'm based in Zurich, Switzerland, part of the MuleSoft professional services team as a technical architect, and happy to be part of this session with you today, Amir.
Cool. Thanks, Michael.
And I'm Andy, also based in Zurich, working in the same team as Michael as an architect and part of the API Force community, obviously.
Great. So you both have long time experience in services, implementing obviously Mule projects. So this would be super exciting to know what you think about the solution which I'm going to present today. Let me quickly share my screen. Okay, how can I do it? Now the first challenge starts here directly. Okay, so let me share here. Now I found it. The solution which I wanted to present to you, and we are going to implement it, so kind of hands-on, is LocalStack. And LocalStack, I was discovering for a customer demo where I can introduce what are the connectors we are offering from MuleSoft side for AWS, and just show them how to work with it. So I had to create an AWS account and all the stuff, getting access to our AWS instance and retrieving all the permissions. So I said, okay, instead of getting to the real account of AWS, maybe there is something which I can, in order to have the demo in place, already prepare and mock. So I came across LocalStack, and it sounded like, AWS completely extracted from the cloud into your local machine. So I was quite a bit skeptical. So I downloaded it and installed it. And the way it was experienced by me, it was really fast. And I was able to quickly set it up and get it running. So from that point of view,
when did they start, Amir? Do you know when did they start with the project of LocalStack?
I think it's around 1 year.
1 year. Okay.
For this, you have some amazing numbers here, right?
Yeah, it's really nice. And I remember I was on a project with Michael 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. And we also had to do some integrations with Amazon services, so mainly SQS and SNS. And we were actually looking for a local solution because we started with the development, but we didn't have any accounts on AWS. It was back then too expensive for the customer to give us the access there. So we were actually looking for like some kind of local stack of AWS to start developing. And I remember we found something, but it was not very mature back then. So they just provided some very basic services, but it was not working very good. I don't know if you remember it, Michael.
Yeah, it was 3 years ago. The only thing that I remember is that at some point I had some access to AWS, and I'm first of all not an AWS expert, okay, but I know the basics. I know to set up some things on AWS. But I remember is that the whole setup of the queues, SQS queues, SNS, and so on, we use Terraform for it. And it was really a huge effort to set up everything, just to have your environment to work with So what I'm wondering how it is with LocalStack, how do you set it up? Do you have also some kind of scripts? Do you use your terminal? What is the way, how do you do it? And what is your effort to basically set up everything locally so that you can start? Because doing everything on AWS can be quite complex if you have no background, no idea how it works.
Exactly. So obviously you need to have some kind of AWS knowledge in order to interact with LocalStack, but it's much faster because it's, you know, emulating everything. And I was wondering, you both have worked with AWS services. So what were the connectors? And it were obviously MuleSoft projects. So what were the connectors you were using in this project?
So it was mainly SQS and SNS connectors back then, because we started to design async integrations, so with queues and dead letter queues. Yeah, so it was mainly those two connectors as far as I can remember.
Yeah. I used also the S3 bucket connector.
Yeah, right. The S3 bucket as well.
That we need to manage, that we need to write into buckets and get them out or read them. Yeah, definitely S3 connectors and of course the queues.
Okay, and this
what kind of connectors are we providing, Amir?
So I think this is something where we could start with, you know, before we drill down into LocalStack. So let's take a look on AWS. What do we have here? So let's filter on the connectors. So for AWS, we have the obvious ones, SQS, Lambda connector, S3 connector. We have S3 Glacier connector, then Redshift connector. And there is also something like Amazon. You have to search for it. So now you can see we have SNS connector, Kinesis data streams.
DynamoDB.
Yes, so it's much more now. So all these services we can interact with on AWS and build Mule apps. So EC2 we also have here. Nice. Yeah. So let's see how you would basically use it for LocalStack and how to set up LocalStack. So what I have learned so far, LocalStack comes with 3 editions. Yeah? So you have an open source edition, which is quite cool. It gives you a good basic functionality of AWS you can interact with. So exactly the connectors you mentioned with SNS, SQS, and S3 are available. But a couple of others like Lambda functions, streaming, you have DynamoDB, which is also available, CloudWatch. So these are available and you can see it on their website. So open source, what possibilities you have. Elastic service is available here as well. Then you have the Pro edition if you want to really go to the next level. And currently we are talking about, right, connecting MuleSoft with AWS services where you use S3 connector or SQS. What the Pro edition offers is the Elastic cluster service. And this could be also a use case because we provide this runtime fabric, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And here you could potentially, we have to try it out. I've not get so far, but you could potentially deploy even runtime fabrics in a container, in a mock service before you deploy it in your production environment. And they also integrate with Terraform and other CI.
It would be really interesting how this works, because usually if we install RTF, we run our Terraforms, which basically starts up all the, or sets up all the EC2 instances with EKS. Yeah, and then you basically deploy your Mule applications in those runtimes. So it would be nice to test it locally as well. I just don't know how it will work with the performance of, I mean, because I don't know how it works, but I guess your local machine is kind of emulating the entire AWS environment or platform.
Exactly. And you know, there's a kind of functionality. You don't have to start every service. So you can filter out exactly those services which you want to develop apps for and test. So it's not really necessary to start everything. So this is something I would think you would use in order to reduce the load on your machine, but it's quite straightforward. You know, if you want to install it, you can, let me go here. I think it's on the docs side. You can get started. There's a get started section, and they offer different kind of setups. So CLI is the easiest one, which I have installed. You can run it as a Docker image or Compose or even as Helm. But I was really straightforward. I downloaded and installed CLI. You need to make sure that your Docker environment is also installed and running. Then it was quite fast to set it up. And for today, what I have planned is that we are going to look into the S3 connector and see if we can connect to this service and create buckets and create files and so on. Yeah? So let's dive into it. The first thing we need to do is starting LocalStack. And, you know, I think if you do it like once it is installed, you just go to your command line, and I have opened two because here I want to run LocalStack and here I will be interacting with. So if I start it, it should probably throw an error because you see Docker is not available. So first of all, I need to start my Docker engine.
One question.
Amir, can you zoom in a little bit? It's very, very small.
How to zoom in? That's a good question.
If you shift command and then plus, shift command and plus.
Okay, let me check.
Usually.
Shift command and plus. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Better?
Better.
Yeah.
One question regarding the installation, because I see that you will now just call or start LocalStack, but what are the options to install? Can you use on your Mac machine something like Brew to install it? I guess it's on the documentation.
Yes, it is in the documentation. So you can see here, you need to have Python, yeah,
Okay.
the pip package, and then you install the CLI with the pip package. And this works really smoothly if you have everything set up. So this shouldn't be a big issue. And let me zoom in here as well. So we have both sides on the same size. Okay, so let me just bring it here. Okay. So sorry for this, guys.
No worries.
Okay, so let's start now. Docker is up and running. We can see here the instance is green. So let's start now. LocalStack, start. So, and that's it, right? So you can see it is running on this port 4566. And what I have to do now is, first of all, it works in the same way using the AWS CLI. Yeah, so you have to configure the AWS CLI first, and you have to have it installed on your machine. So first thing is to configure AWS CLI. And now instead of providing here the access key, you can have your own access key. Yeah, so I used Mule as an access key. Secret is also Mule. Then just one default region name, and the output format is JSON, which I was using. And
well, for LocalStack, we don't need to define the region, right? I mean, at the end, it's running on your local machine.
You
so
can
you
have
just
it running
skip
as
it.
none.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then you basically would do like, you know, AWS, and you start with a flag, which is the endpoint, because now you are going to communicate with AWS. But in this flag, I'm telling it should not go to the cloud. It should go basically to this address, localhost 4566, and here I can say S3LS. Yeah, so show me everything which is in the S3 bucket. And you see it's nothing. And in parallel, you can see it has started the mock service. Yeah? So this is how it's supposed to work. But you know, sometimes you might be a bit lazy and you forget the whole endpoint stuff. So what I have seen somewhere in the video is you can define alias for AWS and say AWS and put the endpoint already in, endpoint URL and HTTP localhost 4566. And this is then the alias, and I can really communicate with it like I'm talking to.
Amir, one question. I did not fully understand that. So you wanted to get back the list of S3 buckets.
Yeah.
So have you already set them up before? Not yet. So you just.
Oh, yes, this is a good point. I know what you are asking now. So if I would now create a bucket, for instance, right? And I shut down my service, it's gone. Yeah, so it's a mocking service. It is completely gone. But once it's running and I create buckets, they should be available. Yeah?
Okay.
And maybe we can try it out now with one of those AWS services. So we can go to S3. And they have here, let's go down here, S3, create bucket. We could directly try this one out.
That's also, what I was wondering when you said, give me or show me all the files in S3, which S3 buckets? So by default, I guess it uses just the default buckets because you have configured one.
Exactly.
Okay.
So now let's see. You can see we have now the bucket created. And you also see where it is running. So if I do like this, I see the sample bucket. And now it will be, Andreas?
If you go back to the documentation, the command there was local AWS local, and you are using AWS.
Yes, so I wanted to have it similarly configured like AWS, but they provide a CLI which you could also download and install. Then you would have to use always AWS local instead of putting an alias, which I did. But it's a great question. With this, you can really, you don't have to configure your existing.
Yeah. So if you install their CLI, you're just going to use AWS local, right? So instead of the alias. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. So this is what is different here. Yeah. Okay. So now let's go to MuleSoft, Anypoint Studio, and try to create a connection with the LocalStack service. So I would just create a simple, we call it, what do we call it? What is it? What we are doing? Mule dev shoutings?
Yeah, S3 demo or something like that.
S3 demo. So that's it. And now first thing is to install the S3 connector. Here we can go to the Exchange portal, download it. So this is pretty simple, but you can see already now what are the different methods we are supporting. So definitely we will find a way to interact now with LocalStack. So first thing is, let's create a connection to it. So AWS, no, this is also weird sometimes, sometimes it works with AWS, sometimes I have to write Amazon.
It even confused me because you were searching before for AWS and it only showed the SQS connector.
Yes.
And if you search for Amazon, it also shows SNS connector. So,
exactly, yeah. So there's some things not really mapped. So what you can see here in the configuration, I have entered my, access key and secret key now. And
I have one question, Amir, because what I have not seen is where exactly and when have you configured your access and your secret key? I think that will be interesting to know when I want to set it up. Where is the step where you do it? I guess it must be somewhere in the beginning. When you call AWS configure for the very first time, you have to provide.
I have already configured it, so I said enter because it was kind of default. But it's good to know that you use this AWS configure and then put this in. But this is if you try to do now test connection, obviously, now it is trying to go to the cloud and connecting to AWS with this access and secret, it's not going to work. So what we are providing for 3 connectors right now is SNS, SQS, and the S3 connector. We provide this custom service. So custom service, this is clear. Then we can enter here HTTP localhost and 4566. And if I would do it now, it is working. Yeah? So we are able to connect.
Okay.
There will be a tweak later on.
Can you go back on the general tab? So if, so the region endpoint will be overwritten by the custom.
Yes, you could do it. You know, I could enter here too. It doesn't really matter. I found out for me. And also if I, you know, because I'm pointing now to the custom service. So if I say here mule 23, I think it should also work. No, this, yeah, exactly. This is working. So it doesn't really matter what it should be here. As long as you have the custom service endpoint, it is connecting to LocalStack. But for the completeness, you know, I'm entering the right thing, so it's okay. Okay, so now let's see. We will just create a few listeners and try to retrieve the data. So first thing is, let's go for, we don't have a configuration now. And let's go for list buckets. And we have obviously operation should be the same, yeah, like here, list bucket, and that's it. Basically, I could also choose here a region, but I won't. And at the end, we can transform the message always in the same way. So we see also what this thing is returning as a response. And from now on, we are going to start the service and always adding our listeners so we can interact with LocalStack. So there will be a little tweak, I can already tell, in the configuration, but let's see if we can discover it.
One thing regarding, because I've seen that it's using Docker in the background, I guess, to run all these containers. So when you stop LocalStack, I guess the state is gone and the applications and the files that you have created are also
everything is gone,
right? So can you configure it to be also persistent? Maybe you want to test it for a longer period of time. You don't want to lose that data.
I'm not sure. I think it should be possible. I've not tried it out, but this should be somehow possible to keep it persistent. Otherwise, you can leave the image running. Okay, so let's start with the very first one, which is list buckets. And let's see if we see a bucket. And this is a bucket we created through the command line. Right, so this is there. I think this was an easy one. As a next step, and now we can try to create our own bucket, which may not be created or may be created. Let's see. So we have here create bucket, and we also drag and drop the create bucket here. But Michael, this is, I think, a very good question in regards to the persistence topic. I do the work once and I have my testing environment and I want to reuse this all the time. So there might be something which is there. Yeah,
I will definitely check out the documentation because I really like the tool, to be honest. And if there is something like that, would be good to know, because you usually do not test just once, but you test it a few times. And I guess this must be possible that you just can configure it. Yeah.
Definitely. Do you know if there is also a GUI available? So like a user interface where we would see all the different buckets or queues and we could purge them, for example?
Yes, so there is a tool called, I think it should be like apps or app. I don't remember it exactly. So it was apps.localstack.cloud, something like this. Let's enter it here. So it's not apps. You know, I cannot see it because, let's write it again. App localstack.cloud. Here you go. So this might be the UI. And I'm now in. I've not tried it out yet, but I'm pretty sure you should be able.
Oh yeah, here it is. So if you go on S3, oh yeah,
it's
great.
here. Straightforward,
Yeah,
first time experience, but it's right away.
Yeah. And I mean, you can just create the new bucket over here. So if you go exactly on create, you just create the second bucket and you would see it.
That's right.
That's amazing. Yeah. So it's running on the local host as well. Yeah, the entire GUI. That's cool.
I have 2 buckets now. That's really cool. Yeah.
What did you type in again? What's the URL?
The URL is app.localstack. So this is the URL. App.localstack.cloud. Then you have to register. Yeah. And then you are on your profile. I still have to complete, I was really into the CLI and tried out everything. And yeah, so here you have also
but this interface is running in the cloud. It's not running locally, right?
Yes.
So you had to log in order to see all the services which you created on LocalStack. Oh, okay. Because I thought it's running locally.
Yes.
It should be that it set up some kind, I don't know, of HTML website, and then you can see it there. Okay, but that's quite cool.
Yep. Okay, so let's continue with our create bucket. So what I've entered here in the name is just a flexible payload .name. So we have to provide a payload, and then we are trying to create a bucket. So let's duplicate this one. Let's do create bucket without S, and in the body we just go for here. What was it? Name, right? Name, and we can enter mule bucket. So let's see. Did I save? Let's save from here. Yeah, so it need to build the application again. And now we can try it out. So it says it has created. So if we list the buckets, we see we have the sample bucket and second bucket, but our bucket is not created, right?
No.
Okay. What was the response? Was the response? Can you go back to the first response when you created it?
So the response is
null. ID null. Okay.
But this is the owner ID. This is the owner ID, but this is also. Yeah, somehow it didn't work, right? And I know why it didn't work. I just want to show it why it didn't work. I didn't quite understand, but maybe, the issue is here. When we configured it, for some reason, I was trying to delete buckets and it was not working. So what you have to do here is you have to write down the localhost IP, right?
Okay.
Not sure why it's not resoluting the local host itself to allow the creation. But once you write this in, I guess now everything should be fine, right? So if we go back now to Postman, we can re-execute the same command. It will not change here. Yeah? It's the same.
Okay.
But if we go here, we have our bucket created. And so this is a tweak which it took me quite a while, and I did not really understand why it was like this.
Can you go back, because again,
is it a bug? I think it's a bug.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's a bug, because 127.0.0.1 is basically localhost. Can you just go back to Anypoint Studio again? I think in the beginning you didn't have configured it as localhost by 0000. I think. Can you just go back?
Here?
Yeah. And then to the custom endpoints, advanced. I think here it was not configured as localhost, but 0.0.
No, it was at localhost.
It was localhost, okay.
The way I found out it should be 127 was once I entered this here and tried to do test connection. It came up with something like, I don't know, which gave me the thought I should try with the IP of the localhost. But somehow, so if you are trying to enter either 000 IP or the local host for the S3 bucket only, it may not work, yeah? But you can try it out. Maybe it works on your scenario, and maybe it was really an environmental issue on my side. But then I tried at some time, I tried, okay, let's say here 127 and the local host IP, and this was it. Yeah? So at the end of the day, I was able to create buckets and also then later on delete buckets. So basically we can now go further, you know, we can delete buckets and create objects and so on, but now it is fully configured, yeah? And you can really use it. And obviously if we go here and see in our, you see our mule bucket is also created.
Very nice.
Can you click on system status? What kind of information is shown there? Okay,
so these are the services. Yeah?
They're available. Okay.
So these are the open source services which are available. Yeah. And if you go to their, you know, GitHub site, you should see somewhere, I saw it. I think it was AWS services. No, this wasn't it. Again, no. Somewhere you can see all the different ports where they are running everything.
Can you also use locally a Terra script to configure all your services?
For LocalStack?
Yeah.
Yes, there was something which I saw as well for Terra script that they are also providing.
Would make sense, because imagine you have so many services that you want to use for local testing. You just run through your script because you want to have that current state or this end state to do your testing. Okay.
So here you can see use the Terraform infrastructure as code framework with LocalStack. So this looks like it's also working. So, you know, as a next step, we can, I mean, we are the API Force team, so we can try it out and share later on also additional experience we have collected. But what I really found useful when working with MuleSoft is on first side, I was able to learn about the AWS connector without dealing with AWS. As a MuleSoft developer, I think this is something which helps you to grow in the MuleSoft community. And secondly, I could, if I want, build applications for AWS services without being connected to the cloud and maybe save costs and build everything offline. So there are a couple of use cases where this local stack really makes sense and provides value.
Yeah, that's the biggest advantage I see as well. I mean, you as a developer, I mean, nowadays we use a lot of AWS services, right? And if you start with development, it could be that you don't have the account created, if you don't have access to certain services because they cost money. And with LocalStack, you can basically just start the development independently of like creating accounts and access, etc. So that's very nice.
Yep, exactly. So shall we now do additional methods, because I think they are going to work. We could do it, you know, just let's create an object and then delete the bucket, like this. And then we wrap up, right?
Yeah.
So let's try it with the HTTP listener, and we go for creating an object. Maybe this might be a bit trickier. So if we say create object, this means I'm going to create now on our MuleSoft bucket, which we have created. We are going to create a file with content in it, because we provide this operation with create bucket, create object. And let's also add the transform message at the end. So let's say JSON, or maybe I could have defined a subflow, which I could reuse here, but anyway.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so let's see what we have here, payload.name. We need to provide a key, and this is like a file key. Yeah? So let's say this is file key, and payload.content, we can say, will be the rest. So we are able to create a file which we can then fill in, and later on the last thing will be we are going to
the file key will basically the identifier of that object.
Yes, so like a name it is, you know, we could say, okay, we are API Force community.json will be the name, or the key, and it will create kind of this file. Yeah. So let's say delete not object. Let's delete the whole bucket. So once this is working, we know it is really working. So it's not something which is, and that, you know, with mocking services, what I found out from my experience in the past is with mocking services, they tend to always be static. When you ping them, they answer with the same response you have defined. But this looks like it's dynamic because I'm creating bucket, and if I've created the bucket, I will upload the file, and let's take a look on the file if the content is really there, because this makes it even more exciting.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say like this, and we have the core. So let's say payload enough. Okay, so let's try it out. We have the first one. You will just extend this one. So it will be create object. And we said, let's do it a bit structure. Here, so we have the name. We have the file key. File key. And this was, let's say, API force.json. And we have the content. Oh, come on. Content, where we say we have the array. In the array, we have our, let's say, data. And in the data, we could now place the different arrays, which will be, let's say this is ID, and this is Mihail Bosniak, and role is troublemaker, no, shooter,
Troubleshooter is good.
Troubleshooter.
I prefer troublemaker.
Okay. So let's say Andy is a troublemaker, right? So we say here, Andy Oberauter is troublemaker, and Amir Khan is the trouble itself. Huh? Okay, so this would be then the thing we want to create. So let's see, something happened. Yeah, and maybe I can use the UI now instead of trying to find the command line for it. Let's see if we are able to see the file and its content. So here we have API force.json. I downloaded it, okay.
Download.
Okay. Oh, it's null. Why it's null? Raw data, null, headers null.
Maybe your mapping is not correct in the configuration from Anypoint Studio. Maybe you can check it out.
Let's take a look.
Key
content. And let's, instead of now changing it, let's do here content and do it again. It will basically overwrite. You download it again, and here you go.
Oh yeah.
And
nice.
This makes it really flexible and dynamic, which is super cool then. Huh?
Can you go back to the response? I just want to see the response structure. Version ID, or I guess because by default a version ID will not be provided. I'm not sure. I know that when you configure an S3 bucket, you can say, do you want to have different versions of the file or not? This is something that needs to be configured. But the E tag, what is the E tag for?
Looks like a
tag
unique ID.
File.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and the last modified date you probably get back if you do get list of objects, right? And you don't get it on create objects.
Yes, I suppose it should be like
but
this.
Do another request, add another ID, another user, and then let's see if you will get last modified date back, because I guess you will then just modify the same file.
Yeah, we can try it. So let's do it like this, and we add Fiona, lib on good.
Just do me a favor, Amir, never call an endpoint create object in real life. You use the HTTP method for it, like post.
Yes.
Because it already indicates
Yeah, here with the get and
get
so on. Yeah.
create object.
Mm. Okay, so now let's see. We have nothing changed, but maybe the file changed. This is something we could probably validate. File was updated, but the metadata not. But maybe you can set it somehow. You know, I've not really looked into it and see what could be a potential issue.
Yeah, those are things that maybe are important when you do testing. So last modified
Yes.
date, you want to see was it successful in the response, because you want to work with the response. We need to go through the documentation and see maybe this is something that needs to be configured. I'm not sure.
Yeah, definitely. I believe this should be, you know, configurable as they provide. So these are really the same CLI commands as you would do in AWS cloud. Yeah.
Cool.
All right, guys. For our event, we have a good news, right? We have
very good news.
Yep.
So Andy, what's the good news?
The good news is that we have LocalStack presenting at our API Force event at the 18th of March. So we're gonna have most probably, exactly, Waldemar and Gerta, so the CEO and the CTO of LocalStack, presenting LocalStack, and then we will be showing how we integrate it with MuleSoft as well. So very excited. So
this is a quite intensive slot. So you see we have 50 minutes where they are going to show you how you develop basically cloud apps offline. And then we are going to show you how you could use potentially LocalStack and MuleSoft together. So basically in a similar demo, but we will add additional complexity. And at this time, we will be able to answer all these questions, which we were not today.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So if you have not registered, go to the meetup MuleSoft, search for API Force or the chapter Zurich, and do your RSVP. It's an on-site event for everyone who's in Switzerland or Germany. They can come to Zurich, and for everyone else, Andy, what we are going to plan or do for everyone else from off?
We will be streaming the sessions. So yeah, we're not going to stream the entire event, but we will be streaming, most of the session probably, but this is something that we still need to decide.
Yes. So what about the LocalStack session?
Yeah, we will be streaming this one.
That's an important one. Yeah.
So this is good news.
I guess we'll have many people that will have questions how it exactly works, and would be good to stream that, definitely.
Yeah. So let's keep that in mind, and we are going to then close for today. And next time, I'm happy to learn from one of you. Yeah. So who will be the next one?
I can do the next part. I already have a nice topic in mind.
Okay.
What's the topic?
Don't tell us.
It's
the format.
Yeah. All right.
I will surprise you. It will be a nice one, and I think we will have a lot of fun.
Okay.
Cool.
Looking forward. Thank you, guys. Enjoy.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, guys.